Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you would sacrifice your own well-being just to honor their memory? Have you ever made a promise that consumed your life, drained your bank account, and kept you awake at night wondering how you'd make it through another month? Well, let me tell you what happened to me. And I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand why trust can sometimes be the most dangerous gift we give to others. My name is Sarah, and 5 years ago, my world collapsed when my husband Michael died in a car accident. He was only 37 years old, full of life, full of dreams, and full of plans for our future together. We had been married for 12 years, and every single day of those 12 years felt like a blessing. But when he died, I didn't just lose my husband. I lost my best friend, my partner, my everything. The grief was overwhelming, suffocating, like drowning in an ocean with no shore in sight. I remember standing at his funeral, surrounded by people whose faces I could barely recognize through my tears, and feeling like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Michael's mother, Dorothy, stood beside me that day, clutching my hand so tightly I could feel her nails digging into my skin. She was crying. We were both crying. And in that moment of shared devastation, she whispered something to me that would change the course of my next 5 years. She said, "Sarah, I don't know how I'm going to survive without him. He was my only son. My baby boy. I'm all alone now, and I don't know what I'm going to do." Her voice cracked with such raw pain that I felt it in my bones. Without thinking, without considering what it would mean for my future, I made her a promise right there at the funeral. I told her, "Dorothy, I will take care of you. Michael would have wanted that. You'll never be alone. I promise you that." She looked at me with those tear-filled eyes, the same eyes that Michael had, and she nodded, squeezing my hand even tighter. The weeks after the funeral were a blur of darkness and despair. I moved through my days like a ghost, going through the motions of living without really being alive. My house felt empty, cold, like all the warmth had died with Michael. His clothes still hung in the closet. His coffee mug still sat by the kitchen sink. His reading glasses still rested on the nightstand. I couldn't bring myself to move anything because moving his things would make his death real, and I wasn't ready for that reality. But life doesn't wait for you to be ready. Bills started piling up, and I realized that Michael had been the primary breadwinner in our family. I had a part-time job at a local bookstore, something I did more for the love of books than for the money, but now that income wasn't enough. I started looking at our finances, trying to understand how I was going to survive, and that's when I remembered my promise to Dorothy. About 2 months after Michael's death, Dorothy called me. Her voice sounded fragile, broken, and she told me she was struggling financially. She said that Michael used to help her with her expenses every month, that her Social Security wasn't enough to cover her rent and medications, and that she didn't know what she was going to do. She didn't directly ask me for money, but the implication was clear. I could hear the desperation in her voice, and I could imagine Michael looking down at me, hoping I would step up and take care of his mother the way he always had. So I asked her, "How much did Michael send you every month?" There was a pause, a long silence that felt heavy with meaning, and then she said, $380. That's what he sent me every month, sweetheart. It made all the difference in the world. $380. It might not sound like a lot to some people, but to me, with my limited income and mounting bills, it was substantial. It was groceries for 2 weeks. It was my car payment. It was the difference between making ends meet and falling behind. But I had made a promise, and I wasn't going to break it. I told her, "Dorothy, I'll continue what Michael started. I'll send you $380 every month. You don't need to worry about anything." I could hear the relief in her voice when she thanked me, crying and telling me how much it meant to her, how Michael had chosen such a wonderful wife, how blessed she was to have me in her life. That first payment felt significant, meaningful, like I was honoring Michael's memory in a tangible way. I went to the bank, withdrew the cash, and mailed it to Dorothy in a simple white envelope with a note that said, "Thinking of you always. Love, Sarah." When she received it, she called me immediately, her voice warm with gratitude, telling me how much it helped, how she had been able to buy her medications and pay her electric bill. Hearing her relief made my own struggles feel worthwhile. It made me feel connected to Michael, like I was continuing his legacy of love and care for his mother. But as the months went by, sending that $380 became increasingly difficult. My part-time job at the bookstore wasn't enough, so I took on a second job waitressing at a diner 3 nights a week. I would work at the bookstore from 9 to 3, then rush home to change into my waitress uniform and work from 4 until midnight. I was exhausted all the time, running on coffee and determination, but I told myself it was temporary. that I would figure things out, that I was doing the right thing. Every month, without fail, I sent Dorothy that money. Sometimes I had to skip buying new clothes for myself. Sometimes I ate ramen noodles for dinner for weeks at a time. Sometimes I turned down invitations from friends because I couldn't afford to go out. My life became smaller, quieter, more focused on survival and on keeping that promise I had made at Michael's funeral. I started keeping a journal during this time, writing down my thoughts and feelings, trying to process my grief while also documenting my struggles. On particularly hard days, I would write things like, "Today I sent Dorothy her money. I had to use my credit card to buy groceries this month. I don't know how long I can keep this up, but I have to. For Michael, for his mother, for the promise I made." Reading those entries now breaks my heart because I can see how much I was sacrificing, how much I was hurting, and how blind I was to what was really happening. Dorothy and I would talk on the phone about once a week. She would tell me about her life, her friends at the senior center, her doctor's appointments, her struggles with arthritis. I would listen, offering comfort and support, feeling like these conversations were my connection to Michael, my way of staying close to the family I had married into. She would always thank me for the money, always remind me how much it helped, always tell me what a blessing I was to her. Sometimes she would say things like, "Michael is looking down at you and smiling, Sarah. He's so proud of the woman you are." Those words would make me cry, would make me feel like all my sacrifices were worth it, would give me the strength to keep going even when I was so tired I could barely stand. I never complained to Dorothy about my financial struggles. I never told her about the second job, about the ramen noodles, about the mounting credit card debt. I didn't want her to feel guilty, didn't want her to worry about me when she was dealing with her own grief and her own problems. I kept my struggles to myself, bearing the weight alone, thinking that's what strength looked like, thinking that's what love required. Looking back now, I realize that my silence was a mistake, that my unwillingness to be vulnerable and honest created a dynamic where Dorothy had no idea what I was sacrificing for her. But at the time, I thought I was being noble, thought I was being selfless, thought I was honoring my husband's memory in the best way I knew how. The first year passed, then the second, then the third. $380 every single month without fail. That's $4,560 a year, and over 5 years, I sent Dorothy $22,800. $22,800 that I earned through exhausting double shifts, through sacrificed dreams, through a life put on hold. And I did it willingly, believing I was doing the right thing, believing I was taking care of family, believing that Michael would be proud of me. But somewhere around the 4th year, little things started to bother me. Small inconsistencies that I initially brushed aside, tiny details that didn't quite add up, fleeting moments that made me pause and wonder. Dorothy would mention going out to lunch with her friends from the senior center, and I would think, how can she afford to go out to lunch if money is so tight? She would talk about buying gifts for her grandnieces and grandnephews, and I would wonder, where is that money coming from? Once she mentioned getting her hair done at a salon, and I remember feeling a twinge of jealousy because I had been cutting my own hair for years to save money. But I pushed those thoughts away, telling myself I was being petty, telling myself that everyone deserves small pleasures, telling myself that maybe she was being more careful with her money, managing better than she used to. I didn't want to be suspicious of Dorothy. I didn't want to question her or doubt her. She was Michael's mother, and questioning her felt like betraying Michael's memory. So I ignored the little voice in the back of my mind that whispered, "Something doesn't add up." I silenced my doubts, buried my suspicions, and continued sending that money every single month. Then, about 4.5 years after Michael's death, something happened that I couldn't ignore. I was at the grocery store, struggling to decide between buying vegetables or paying for the gas I needed to get to work the next day, when I ran into Dorothy's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. I had met her a few times at Dorothy's house, a sweet elderly woman who lived next door and who sometimes played cards with Dorothy. We started chatting, just casual small talk, and then Mrs. Patterson said something that made my blood run cold. She said, "Oh, Sarah, it's so wonderful how close you and Dorothy have stayed even after Michael's passing. She talks about you all the time. And she's doing so well, too. Just bought herself a brand new television, one of those big fancy ones. She invited me over to watch her shows on it, and I tell you, the picture is crystal clear. A brand new television, a big fancy one. While I was standing in a grocery store trying to decide between vegetables and gas money, I felt something shift inside me in that moment, something fundamental and irreversible. I smiled at Mrs. Patterson, made some polite excuse, and left the store without buying anything. I sat in my car in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and I felt anger bubbling up inside me for the first time in years. Not sadness, not grief, not exhaustion, but pure, burning anger. How could Dorothy buy a brand new expensive television if she was struggling so much that she needed my $380 every month? How could she afford such a luxury when I could barely afford necessities? The questions swirled in my mind, getting louder and more insistent, and I knew I couldn't ignore them anymore. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities, trying to find explanations that would make sense, trying to convince myself that maybe Mrs. Patterson had been mistaken. Maybe the television had been a gift. Maybe there was a reasonable explanation. But deep down, I knew. I knew something was very wrong. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the sacrifices I had made over the past 4.5 years. I thought about the second job I had worked until my feet ached and my back hurt. I thought about the social invitations I had turned down because I couldn't afford to go out. I thought about the dreams I had put on hold, the vacation I had never taken, the life I had stopped living because I was so focused on keeping my promise to Dorothy. And I thought about Michael, wondering what he would think if he could see what was happening, wondering if he would be proud of me or horrified by how I had let myself be used. Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew suddenly comes into question? Where the foundation of your beliefs starts to crack and crumble beneath your feet? That's what that night felt like for me. The next morning, I decided to do something I had never done before. I decided to investigate. I felt guilty even thinking about it, like I was betraying Dorothy's trust, but I needed to know the truth. I needed to understand what was really going on. I started with social media, something I rarely used but Dorothy was surprisingly active on. I found her Facebook page and started scrolling through her posts from the past few years. What I saw made my stomach turn. There were photos of Dorothy at restaurants, fancy restaurants with white tablecloths and wine glasses, smiling and posing with friends. There were pictures of new clothes, jewelry, a new purse that I recognized as an expensive brand. There were check-ins at a local casino, multiple check-ins over several months, showing she was going there regularly. And yes, there was a photo of the brand new television, a massive flat screen that probably cost over $1,000, with Dorothy beaming proudly in front of it. The caption read, "Treated myself to this beauty. You only live once." Treated herself. With my money. With the money I earned by working myself to exhaustion. With the money I sent her every month believing she needed it for rent and medications. I felt sick. I felt betrayed. I felt like the biggest fool in the world. But I needed more proof. I needed to be absolutely certain before I did anything. So I kept digging. I looked at her posts more carefully, reading the comments from her friends. One comment on a restaurant photo said, "Another fancy dinner, Dorothy. You're living the high life." Another comment on a casino check-in said, "Good luck at the slots tonight." And on the television photo, someone had written, "You deserve it after that big win last month." Big win? What big win? I started piecing together a picture that was completely different from what Dorothy had told me. This wasn't a woman struggling to make ends meet. This wasn't a grieving mother barely surviving on Social Security. This was a woman living comfortably, enjoying herself, going out regularly, buying expensive things, and gambling. And she was doing it all while taking $380 from me every single month. I spent the entire day going through her social media, taking screenshots, documenting everything I found. I discovered posts about trips to visit friends in other states, photos from birthday parties at upscale venues, pictures of expensive gifts she had bought for other people. With each new discovery, my anger grew. But beneath the anger was something even more painful. Heartbreak. I had trusted her. I had sacrificed for her. I had honored my promise to Michael by taking care of his mother, and she had been lying to me for nearly 5 years. That evening, I printed out some of the most damning screenshots and spread them on my kitchen table. I stared at them for hours, trying to understand how someone could do this to another person, especially to someone who was grieving, someone who was trying to honor their dead son's memory. I thought about all the times Dorothy had thanked me for the money, all the times she had told me how much it helped, all the times she had said she didn't know what she would do without me. Every single word had been a lie. Every expression of gratitude had been manipulation. Every claim of financial struggle had been a performance designed to keep me sending that money month after month after month. I cried that night, harder than I had cried since Michael's funeral. But these tears were different. These weren't tears of grief. They were tears of betrayal, of anger, of profound disappointment in someone I had trusted completely. I felt stupid for not seeing it sooner, for ignoring the signs, for being so focused on keeping my promise that I hadn't questioned whether Dorothy deserved that promise. I thought about Michael, about what he would say if he knew what his mother had done. Would he have known she was like this? Had he really been sending her money every month, or had that been a lie too? Questions multiplied in my mind, each one more troubling than the last. But I wasn't done investigating yet. I needed to know more. I needed to understand the full extent of her deception. The next day, I called the apartment complex where Dorothy lived. I pretended to be calling on Dorothy's behalf, saying I was her daughter-in-law and asking about the rent amount and payment history. The property manager was helpful, assuming I was calling to assist Dorothy with her finances. What she told me made everything click into place with horrible clarity. Dorothy's rent was $1,050 a month, but she was living in subsidized senior housing, meaning she only paid 30% of her income. Based on her Social Security, her actual rent payment was around $315 a month. $315. Not the $600 or $700 I had assumed she was paying. And that $380 I sent her every month? It was more than her rent. It was pure extra money that she was using to fund her lifestyle while I worked 2 jobs and ate ramen noodles. I thanked the property manager and hung up, sitting in stunned silence as the full weight of the betrayal settled over me. For nearly 5 years, Dorothy had been taking my money under false pretenses. She had lied about needing it for rent and medications. She had manipulated my grief, exploited my love for Michael, and used my sense of duty and honor to fund her entertainment and luxuries. I had sent her $22,800. $22,800 that I had earned through sacrifice and struggle. $22,800 that she had spent on televisions and restaurants and casino trips while I suffered in silence. The anger I felt was unlike anything I had ever experienced. It was hot and fierce and all-consuming, and it demanded action. I couldn't let this continue. I couldn't let her keep taking advantage of me. I had to confront her, had to tell her I knew the truth, had to end this cycle of deception once and for all. But I was also terrified. Confronting Dorothy meant accepting that the woman I had tried to care for, the woman I had sacrificed so much for, was not who I thought she was. It meant acknowledging that I had been a fool, that I had been used, that my kindness had been weaponized against me. It meant facing painful truths about trust and family and the promises we make in moments of grief. I took a few days to prepare myself emotionally for the confrontation. I rehearsed what I would say, imagined how she might respond, tried to anticipate her excuses and denials. I gathered all my evidence, the screenshots from social media, the information about her rent, the records of every payment I had sent her over the years. I wanted to be armed with facts, with proof, with undeniable evidence that would make it impossible for her to lie her way out of this. Part of me hoped there would be some explanation, some reason that would make this all make sense, that would restore my faith in Dorothy and prove I hadn't been betrayed. But I knew that hope was foolish, that the evidence was too clear, that there was no innocent explanation for what she had done. Finally, on a Saturday morning, I drove to Dorothy's apartment. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I felt like I might throw up from the anxiety and anger coursing through my body. I had called her the day before to tell her I was coming over, saying I needed to talk to her about something important. She had sounded cheerful and welcoming, completely unaware of what was coming. When I arrived at her apartment building, I sat in my car for several minutes, taking deep breaths, trying to calm myself down enough to walk inside. I looked at the building, a nice subsidized senior housing complex with well-maintained grounds and a community center, and I thought about how many times I had worried about Dorothy living here, worried about whether she had enough money, worried about whether she was okay. All that worry had been wasted on someone who didn't deserve it. I finally forced myself out of the car and walked to her apartment. I knocked on the door, and within seconds, Dorothy opened it with a big smile on her face. "Sarah, come in, come in. It's so good to see you, sweetheart," she said, hugging me tightly. I hugged her back stiffly, my body rigid with tension, and stepped inside. The first thing I noticed was the television. The massive, expensive television that Mrs. Patterson had mentioned. It dominated the living room, impossibly large and clearly brand new. Dorothy noticed me looking at it and said proudly, "Oh, you noticed my new TV. Isn't it wonderful?" I finally treated myself to something nice. The picture is absolutely incredible. Treated herself. With my money. I felt my anger surge, but I forced myself to stay calm, to stick to my plan. I sat down on her couch, declining her offer of tea or coffee, and said, "Dorothy, I need to talk to you about something serious." The smile faded from her face, replaced by concern. What's wrong, dear? You look upset. I took a deep breath and said, I need to talk to you about the money I've been sending you every month. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, something that might have been fear or guilt, but she quickly masked it with confusion. The money? What about it? Sarah, you know how much I appreciate everything you do for me. That money has been a lifesaver. A lifesaver. The lie came so easily to her, so smoothly, like she had rehearsed it 1,000 times. I pulled out my phone and opened the screenshots I had saved. Dorothy, I've been doing some research and I need you to be honest with me. Do you really need that $380 every month for rent and medications? She looked at my phone, at the screenshots I was showing her, and I saw the color drain from her face. She knew. She knew I had discovered the truth. But instead of admitting it, instead of apologizing, she tried to defend herself. Sarah, I don't understand what you're implying. Yes, I need that money. Do you think I would lie to you about something like that? Her voice had an edge to it now, defensive and sharp. I felt something snap inside me. All the politeness, all the restraint, all the careful planning went out the window, and I let my anger speak. Don't lie to me anymore, Dorothy. I know your rent is only $315 because you're in subsidized housing. I know you've been posting on Facebook about fancy dinners and casino trips and buying expensive televisions. I know you don't need my money for survival. You've been using it to fund your lifestyle while I've been working 2 jobs and struggling to pay my own bills. The silence that followed was deafening. Dorothy stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, clearly scrambling for a response. Then, instead of apologizing, instead of showing remorse, she got angry. How dare you investigate me like I'm some kind of criminal? How dare you question what I do with money that's given to me? You offered to help me, Sarah. I didn't force you to send me anything. Her response shocked me. I had expected denial, maybe excuses, but not this aggressive deflection of blame. You're right, Dorothy. You didn't force me, but you lied to me. You told me you needed the money for rent and medications. You made me believe you were struggling when you weren't. You took advantage of my grief and my desire to honor Michael's memory. You manipulated me for nearly 5 years. She stood up, her face red with anger. I am struggling. Just because I occasionally treat myself to something nice doesn't mean I'm rolling in money. You have no idea what it's like to be my age, to be alone, to have lost my only son. That money helped me cope, helped me have some joy in my life. I stood up too, matching her energy. That money was supposed to be for necessities, Dorothy. You told me it was for rent and medications. And while you were gambling at casinos and buying $1,000 televisions, I was eating ramen noodles and working myself to exhaustion. I have been barely surviving while you've been living it up with my money. She pointed her finger at me accusingly. Michael would be ashamed of you right now, questioning his own mother like this, accusing me of lying when all I've done is try to survive after losing my son. That statement, that manipulation of Michael's memory, was the final straw. I felt tears streaming down my face, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. Don't you dare use Michael against me. Don't you dare pretend this is about him when you've been dishonoring his memory by lying and stealing from his widow. Michael would be ashamed of you, Dorothy, not me. The argument escalated from there, both of us shouting, both of us saying things we couldn't take back. Dorothy accused me of being ungrateful, of abandoning her, of being a terrible daughter-in-law. I accused her of being a liar, a manipulator, a user who had exploited my kindness. Back and forth we went, years of resentment and anger pouring out in a torrent of painful words. Finally, exhausted and emotionally drained, I said the words I had come there to say. I'm done, Dorothy. I'm not sending you any more money. Not one more dollar. Our financial relationship is over, and honestly, our entire relationship is over. I can't have someone in my life who would use me like this, who would lie to me for years, who would take advantage of my love for my dead husband. You've betrayed me in the worst possible way, and I will never forgive you for it. Dorothy's face crumbled, and suddenly the anger was replaced by panic. Sarah, please, you can't do this. I need that money. I've been counting on it. You made a promise. I shook my head, feeling a sense of liberation mixed with profound sadness. I made a promise based on lies, Dorothy. You don't need the money, you want it. And I'm done sacrificing my own well-being to fund your wants. I gathered my things and headed for the door. Dorothy followed me, pleading now, her voice desperate. Sarah, please, we can work this out. I'm sorry if I wasn't completely honest about everything, but you can't just cut me off like this. What about family? What about Michael's memory? I turned to look at her one last time. You should have thought about family and Michael's memory before you decided to lie to me for 5 years. Goodbye, Dorothy. I walked out of her apartment and didn't look back, even though I could hear her calling after me, her voice echoing down the hallway. I got in my car, drove a few blocks away, pulled into a parking lot, and broke down completely, sobbing so hard I could barely breathe. The days and weeks following that confrontation were incredibly difficult. Dorothy called me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that ranged from apologetic to angry to desperately pleading. She sent text messages saying she was sorry, that she had made mistakes, that she needed me, that we could work things out. I blocked her number after the first week because I couldn't handle the constant contact, couldn't handle her attempts to manipulate me back into sending her money. Some of Michael's extended family reached out to me, having heard Dorothy's version of events. She had told them that I had abandoned her, that I had cruelly cut her off financially without warning, that I was punishing her for being old and needing help. She painted herself as the victim and me as the villain, and some family members believed her. I received messages from cousins and aunts telling me I should be ashamed of myself, that family takes care of family, that I was dishonoring Michael's memory by treating his mother so poorly. Those messages hurt, deeply, but I refused to defend myself or explain the situation. I realized that anyone who would judge me without hearing my side of the story, anyone who would automatically believe Dorothy's lies, wasn't someone I needed in my life. I let them think what they wanted to think and focused on my own healing. But not everyone sided with Dorothy. Michael's younger cousin Emma, someone I had always been close to, called me about 2 weeks after the confrontation. She said, "Sarah, I heard what happened with Aunt Dorothy, and I want you to know that I believe you. I've always known there was something off about her, the way she always seemed to have money for things she wanted but claimed to be broke. I'm sorry you went through this, and I'm here if you need to talk." That phone call meant everything to me. It reminded me that not everyone was fooled by Dorothy's act, that some people could see the truth, that I wasn't alone. Emma and I talked for hours that day, and she shared stories about Dorothy that confirmed my suspicions. Dorothy had a history of manipulating people for money, of exaggerating her financial struggles while living quite comfortably. Apparently, she had done similar things to other family members over the years, though never to the extent or duration that she had done with me. Financially, cutting off Dorothy's payments made an immediate difference in my life. That first month, when I had $380 that I didn't have to send to her, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I paid down some of my credit card debt, bought actual groceries instead of ramen noodles, and for the first time in years, I didn't have to stress about making ends meet quite so desperately. I was able to quit my second job at the diner, which meant I had evenings free again, time to rest and recover from the exhaustion that had become my constant companion. Slowly, very slowly, I started rebuilding my life. I started saying yes to invitations from friends, going out for coffee or dinner, reconnecting with people I had drifted away from during those years of financial struggle. I bought myself some new clothes, nothing expensive or extravagant, but things that fit properly and made me feel good about myself. I even took a weekend trip to the beach, something I hadn't done since before Michael died, and I sat on the sand watching the waves and feeling like I could finally breathe again. But the emotional healing was much harder than the financial recovery. I struggled with guilt, wondering if I had been too harsh with Dorothy, wondering if I should have tried to understand her perspective better, wondering if Michael would have wanted me to forgive her. I struggled with anger, replaying our confrontation in my mind over and over, thinking of all the things I should have said, all the evidence I should have presented more clearly. I struggled with sadness, mourning the relationship I had thought I had with Dorothy, mourning the loss of that connection to Michael's family. And I struggled with trust, questioning my own judgment, wondering how I had been so blind for so long, fearing that I would never be able to trust anyone again. I started seeing a therapist, something I should have done years earlier, and through our sessions, I began to understand the complicated dynamics that had allowed Dorothy's manipulation to continue for so long. My therapist helped me see that my grief over Michael's death had made me vulnerable, that Dorothy had exploited that vulnerability, and that my desire to honor Michael's memory had been weaponized against me. Through therapy, I also came to understand that what Dorothy did wasn't just about money. It was about power and control. By making me dependent on her approval, by positioning herself as someone I needed to take care of in order to be a good person, in order to honor Michael properly, she had maintained control over me for years. Every month when I sent that money, I was reinforcing her power over me, proving my devotion, demonstrating my worth as Michael's widow. And the most insidious part was that I had done it willingly, believing I was making a noble sacrifice, when in reality I was participating in my own exploitation. Understanding this helped me let go of the guilt. I realized that I hadn't been too harsh with Dorothy. If anything, I had been too lenient by not confronting her sooner. I realized that Michael wouldn't have wanted me to sacrifice my own well-being for his mother, especially not based on lies. I realized that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing someone to continue hurting you, that setting boundaries doesn't make you a bad person, that protecting yourself is not only okay but necessary. About 6 months after the confrontation, I heard through Emma that Dorothy was fine. She was still living in her apartment, still receiving her Social Security, still going to the casino and buying things she wanted. My $380 a month had been extra money for her. Not essential money, just as I had suspected. Learning this removed any lingering doubt I had about my decision. She truly hadn't needed my money. She had just wanted it, and she had been willing to lie and manipulate to get it. I also learned that she had found a new target, a man she had started dating at the senior center, someone with a decent pension who was now taking her out to nice dinners and apparently giving her money. The pattern continued, just with a different victim. Part of me wanted to warn him, to tell him the truth about Dorothy, but I decided it wasn't my responsibility to save everyone from her. I had to focus on my own healing, my own recovery, my own life. Now, a full year after that confrontation, I can look back on the experience with more clarity and less raw emotion. I've learned so much about myself, about boundaries, about trust, about grief, and about the ways people can use our love and loyalty against us. I've learned that keeping a promise doesn't mean allowing yourself to be exploited, that honoring someone's memory doesn't require sacrificing your own well-being, that family relationships should be based on mutual respect and honesty, not manipulation and lies. I've learned that it's okay to say no, okay to question things that don't make sense, okay to investigate when you suspect something is wrong. I've learned that kindness without boundaries is not kindness at all. It's self-destruction. I've also learned that healing takes time, that recovering from betrayal is a process, that rebuilding trust in yourself and others doesn't happen overnight. There are still days when I feel angry about what Dorothy did, days when I calculate how much money I could have saved if I hadn't sent her those payments, days when I wonder how different my life could have been. But those days are becoming less frequent, and I'm learning to let go of the anger, to accept what happened, and to move forward with wisdom gained from the experience. I've started dating again, something I never thought I would do. I met someone kind and honest, someone who doesn't try to manipulate me or use my past against me, someone who respects my boundaries and appreciates my strength. It's early still, and I'm taking things slowly, but it feels good to open my heart again, to trust again, to believe that not everyone will betray me the way Dorothy did. And I think Michael would be happy about that. I think he would want me to find happiness again, to build a new life, to not let his death or his mother's betrayal define the rest of my existence. I've also reconnected with my own family, relationships that had suffered during those years when I was so focused on supporting Dorothy. My parents, my siblings, my friends, they've all welcomed me back with open arms, supporting me through the healing process, celebrating my recovery, reminding me of who I am beyond my role as Michael's widow or Dorothy's victim. Looking back, I can see now that there were red flags from the very beginning. The way Dorothy never provided specific details about her expenses, the way she always had money for certain things while claiming to be desperate for my payments, the way she skillfully avoided any real financial transparency while keeping me emotionally invested in supporting her. I ignored those red flags because I was grieving, because I wanted to believe in her, because I had made a promise, and I'm someone who keeps my promises. But I've learned that promises made under false pretenses, promises based on lies and manipulation, are not binding. I've learned that you can release yourself from commitments that were obtained through deception without being a bad person. I've learned that self-preservation is not selfishness, and that taking care of yourself is not the same as abandoning others. These are lessons I wish I hadn't had to learn the hard way, but they are lessons that have fundamentally changed how I approach relationships, trust, and my own worth. If I could go back and talk to myself at Michael's funeral, the Sarah who made that promise to Dorothy, I would tell her to wait, to not make commitments in moments of overwhelming grief, to investigate before sacrificing, to trust but verify. But I can't go back, and maybe that's okay. Maybe I needed to go through this experience to become who I am now, stronger, wiser, more discerning, more protective of my own well-being. Maybe this painful journey was necessary for my growth, even though I wouldn't wish it on anyone else. The most important thing I've learned through all of this is that my worth is not determined by how much I sacrifice for others. For years, I measured my value as Michael's widow by how well I took care of his mother, how much I gave up, how much I endured. I thought that suffering and sacrifice made me a good person, made me worthy of Michael's love, made me honorable. But that's not true. Goodness isn't measured by how much you allow others to take from you. Honor isn't demonstrated by letting people exploit your kindness. Love doesn't require you to destroy yourself to prove it's real. Today, I'm rebuilding my life on a foundation of self-respect and healthy boundaries. I'm working one job that I enjoy, living within my means, saving money for the first time in years. I'm pursuing hobbies I had abandoned, like painting and hiking. I'm investing in friendships and family relationships that are reciprocal and supportive. I'm learning to listen to my intuition, to question things that don't feel right, to prioritize my own well-being alongside my care for others. I'm becoming the person I was before grief made me vulnerable, but better, stronger, more aware. And I'm sharing my story because I know I'm not the only one who has been manipulated by someone they trusted, who has sacrificed too much for someone who didn't deserve it, who has kept a promise that was obtained through deception. If you're reading this, if you're in a similar situation, I want you to know that it's okay to question, okay to investigate, okay to set boundaries, and okay to walk away. You are not a bad person for protecting yourself. You are not dishonoring anyone's memory by refusing to be exploited. You are not obligated to continue relationships that harm you, even if those relationships are with family. Your well-being matters. Your financial security matters. Your happiness matters. And anyone who truly loves you will want those things for you too, not exploit them for their own gain. So I'm asking you now, have you ever been in a situation where you sacrificed too much for someone who didn't deserve it? Have you ever kept a promise that was based on lies? Have you ever realized that someone you trusted was manipulating you? I want to hear your stories in the comments below. Share your experiences, your struggles, your victories. Let's create a community of people who understand, who support each other, who remind each other that we deserve better than exploitation disguised as family duty. And if you found value in my story, if it helped you in any way, if it made you think about your own relationships and boundaries, please leave a like on this video. Your engagement helps this message reach more people who might need to hear it, who might be struggling in silence the way I was for so long. Subscribe to my Truth Revealed Tales for more real stories from real people navigating complex situations, making difficult choices, and finding their way through life's challenges. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new story, because every story shared here has the potential to help someone who's going through something similar. Remember, understanding these situations, recognizing manipulation, and learning to set healthy boundaries can literally change your life the way it changed mine. Thank you for listening to my truth, for allowing me to share this painful but important part of my journey, and for being part of this community. You are not alone, and together we can learn, heal, and build better, healthier lives. Stay strong, stay wise, and never be afraid to question what doesn't feel right. Your instincts are trying to protect you. Listen to them.